if you back up a little bit, you can say right now we have a digital currency. It's already here. We already have a central bank digital currency, except for one thing, and that is the programmability of the currency. Or another way to put it is, it the digital currency that they're talking about bringing to us now will be their currency, not ours.
Hello and welcome to Soar Financially, a channel where we discuss the macro to understand the micro. My name is Kai Hoffman. I'm the EdJR mining guy over next, and of course, your host of this channel. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation with our guest today. It's G. Edward Griffin. He's the author of The Creature from Jekyll Island. I'm fanboying a little bit, and I'm excited to have him join us. We're going to learn a little bit about the history of the Fed, how was it founded, the role of the Fed today, and of course, we need to talk about hashtag end the Fed as well. What does that mean? What could that look like? And of course, just the role and changing role of the Fed these days. So there's a lot to talk about. These are just a couple talking points I do want to cover with my guests. So bear with me for a second and subscribe to this channel. Hit the like and subscribe button. It means a lot to us so we can bring guests like Ed on the channel more frequently. So thank you so much for doing that. Now, Ed, it is a great pleasure to have you on the program. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, I'm fanboying a little bit. Last summer, I was on Jekyll Island and reminisced a little bit, thinking about your book and just walking through there. It was a great place, like the historic hotel of the world. But one thing that bumped me out, I could not buy your book there. And I went to the gift shop at the hotel and I asked the nice lady there, is like, oh, is the book available? Do you have it? Because it'd be great to buy it right there. And I almost got a bit of a snippy or snarky reply. It's like, not sure. It's like, you don't have any beef with the hotel, do you?
Well, that's really strange because it wasn't too long ago. I think about last time I checked in on it was about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, something like that. That book was the best-selling book in the best-selling item actually in the whole gift shop there on the island, and we knew that because some friend of ours was there and took a picture of the display of the book right there on the shelf. As you walk in the door, that's the first thing you saw. There it was. It all decorated. Several copies were on display, and we always sold a lot of copies, cases full of copies to the various store shops and souvenir shops there on the island. So something happened. I guess the powers that be said, "Oh, we got to bury this information," or something like that.
No, I was bummed out. I wanted to buy the copy there and
Yeah.
take it with me, of course. So, but a great place. So, but let's talk about Jekyll Island. Let's talk a bit. Let's start maybe with the history, of your book as well. It's about the creation of. Oh, are we back?
Yeah,
it's
no.
about the creation of the Fed, of course. Maybe we'll start a little bit. 1910 runs a bit through what happened on Jekyll Island, and what is the general idea.
Well, it broke up, but I guess you were asking me what is the creature from Jekyll Island? That's pretty much. Well, in addition to my book title, it's the story of a historical analysis, actually, and a story. And it's a whodunit. I wrote it like a whodunit mystery book because a lot of treatises on the Federal Reserve System and money and banking have been written over the years, but most of them are technical and kind of, unless you're wanting to make a career of banking, it's something you wouldn't be particularly interested in reading, and a lot of details and technical items. But I decided that I would write this book if I could, like a whodunit mysteries story, because when I got into the topic myself, I discovered that the creature from Jekyll Island, of course, we're talking about the Federal Reserve System, which was created on Jekyll Island, and that's the reason for the title, that represents perhaps one of the greatest crimes in all history. It's been right under our noses all along, and I thought it should be written about and described as a crime. And so we had to talk about who did it, how they did it, how they covered it up, where they buried the body, and so forth. And also, I'm being a little bit facetious, but that was sort of the twist that I had in mind. I wanted to make it a story rather than just a lot of details. So to answer your question, it's the story and the historical record of how the central bank, is what they call themselves nowadays around the world. Not a bank, by the way, but it's an institution. It's a Actually, it's a cartel, surprisingly enough. Federal Reserve System is not a bank, even though it calls itself Federal Reserve Bank. And it's not a bank. It's not a government agency. Well, what is it? Well, it's a cartel. And it's no different really in structure or purpose than, an oil cartel, for example, or an onion cartel or something like that. This happens to be a banking cartel. And once you get your head around that, it's kind of shocking because in spite of all the effort that they have gone to make it seem like they were, representing the American people, like being a government agency, they put on that facade, and they don't like to talk about the fact that they're a cartel. And so once you get your head around that, you realize that what is the purpose of a cartel? Well, it's clear. The purpose of all cartels is to promote the position and the advantages of the members of the cartel, period. It's not to make America great again. It's not to make the people in America prosperous. It's not to preserve the purchasing power of the dollar. It's none of the above, although they go to great lengths to make it sound that way. And what is it? It's how to enrich the members of the cartel and how to give them more power over the political and social and even the cultural system of the world. So that's what it is, and it's a book about that, and it's 600 over 600 pages. I kept writing this thing. I got to stop. Somebody stop me,
611 pages, I believe it is. Yeah.
And just as a side note on that, I should say that it's obvious that I'm probably the last or the least most likely person to write a book on the Federal Reserve System. I knew nothing about it when I started. When I went to school, I never studied money or banking. I had no interest in it, had no knowledge of it. And how I came to write it is a long story. But anyway, I had to learn everything from the ground up. At first, I thought it was going to be too much for my simple mind because it sounds very complicated when you start talking about the principles of banking and currencies and exchanges and all these machinations that they have to do in the banking world. But once you start overlooking the mechanics and start looking at the principles or the purposes of what all of these things do, it becomes very simple. They're stealing money from us. Oh, they're not there to stabilize the currency or the economy. They're there to steal from us. Oh, now it gets simple. Really, now you see, oh, that's why they did this, and that's why because the average person looks at what the Federal Reserve System is doing, or looks at what most of government projects are doing, and they say, well, that's stupid. That won't work. I should write a letter to my congressman. That won't work. Well, see, the reality is, once you really get into it, they know it won't work, and that's why they are doing it. Because now we're getting into the deeper part of this. It's not just about anymore. It's not just about making money and plundering the voters and the citizens. It's not just about money anymore. It's about political power and control. And in order to change the system from what we used to have to what they want in the near future, and they've been moving rapidly toward it, they have to break down everything that we've had in the past. It has to be destroyed. And they talk about this in their private papers, by the way. And they use words just like that, just as strong. We must destroy the existing system. We must crush it. In fact, and one of the things I put in my book, which I thought was very revealing, was the history of the whole thing. There was the movement, the socialist movement in Great Britain is interesting. There was a group of people that formed the socialist system, an organization. I'm having trouble reaching for the exact name of it now. You can probably tell. It's the Fabian Socialist Society, the Fabian Society, which was organized in Great Britain, still there, by the way. And most people never heard of it, but one of the most powerful political institutions in the world. And when this all began, they had a headquarters not in London, but near London. It was in the home of some very wealthy people there. And everybody talked about the stained glass window that they had in that home, and it disappeared for a long time, and then it showed up all of a sudden, and now it's revered. It's in the museum, and everybody can go and take pictures of it and so forth. The stained glass window was supposed to be a representation of the strategies and objectives of the Fabian Socialist Society. Now, when I say that it's not just a socialist society, it's a political movement. I would guess at least half of the prime ministers of England, Great Britain, have been members of the Fabian Socialist Society, and a huge number of the legislature in Great Britain have been members of the Fabian Socialist Society. This is a big group, but they sort of stay in the shadows, and they make you think it's kind of like a study group, you know? No, this is a power group. Anyway, the stained glass window, the reason I mentioned it is because it sort of depicts what I'm talking about, this destruction of the old system. And there's much on that window to describe, but this one aspect, it shows in the center of this window, there's a depiction of the earth on a huge anvil. And the members of the Fabian Socialist Society are shown, they're dressed sort of like monks, and they have hammers in their hands, and they are raising the hammers, and they're about to strike the earth with these hammers. And now, okay, what's that all about? Across the top of the window, there's this inscription from the Omar Khayyam, the poem Omar Khayyam. And if I can remember it close enough, I think it goes something like this. Dearest love, if thou and I could conspire to change the sorry scheme of things entire, would we not shatter it to bits and then remold it closer to the heart's desire? And there you have it. There you have it right there. This is the unspoken but obvious strategy behind this world movement toward global government and concentration of power and wealth and obedient servants to the state and all that sort of thing. They call it the New World Order. That's the name for it. And that's the strategy. How do you bring this about? You have to destroy the old system first. And once you understand that that is a strategy and not a mistake, then so much of the unfathomable events of today begin to make sense. And I discovered that in my research for the Federal Reserve System, because I was trying to make sense of it, but this won't work. This is stupid. And then I finally got the idea, oh, that's why they're doing it. This wasn't supposed to work. It was, they tried to make us think that they were trying, you know, their best, but conditions were such that we just need more money and more power. So anyway, back to your question, what is it? It's about the historical record of the creation and the expansion of the power of this institution. It's in our country, it's called the Federal Reserve System. In other countries, it's called central banking. And what it is a private cartel of bankers who have captured political control of their respective countries. And following the dictum of Lord Rothschild, going back a couple of centuries, he said that give me the power to create the nation's money, and I care not who writes the laws. And that's about it. Now, if you think about that too, you see, it gets real simple when you realize that there are motivations behind this that aren't necessarily in your best interest or mine. Once you understand there are criminals involved in high positions, and this is not a conspiracy theory, by the way, it's a conspiracy fact. It's a fact of history. Once you get that clear in your mind, you say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that. Now everything begins to make sense. So I'll stop with that. That's what the book is all about. And I'll just add one more thing, is that most, if not almost all of it, I would say 99.2% or something of it, is not my editorial opinion or anybody else's editorial opinion. It's taken directly from the records, the written records, the speeches, the papers, the books that were, and interviews that were made by the people themselves who created the Federal Reserve and who now are actually running it today. So it comes from the lion's mouth, so to speak. It doesn't come from critics. It comes from the people who really enjoy doing what they are doing.
we have to talk about the victim in your book. And the question, the book or the Fed was created 115 years ago. So somebody's obviously playing the long game, because the question is not who's the victim? I think we need to define that just a little bit for clarity's sake. But also, is the victim dead already? Or do we have a chance to save the victim if a clever character comes around with his sidekick and figures out a solution? I'm being a bit funny here, of course, but who's the victim? B, is the victim already dead 115 years later? We have to talk about that.
Well, that second one is going to be the interesting one. The victim obviously is the masses, as Karl Marx liked to call them, the masses of the people, the average person who's just making a living, trying to enjoy life and provide for his family and do the best he can, have a little fun along the way, and do some good things, hopefully. A smaller group of people don't really care about doing good things. They just want to live off the backs and the efforts of other people. And now the interesting thing about history, at least as I see it, is that usually it's that second group, that little tiny group of psychopaths that want to have power over other people, and they want to literally enslave other people. They may not think of it as enslavement, but if they can just heavily tax them, that's the same thing. If you force people to work 50% of their lives to earn the money to pay the taxes, well, then you just made them a slave for 50% of their lives. They are now your slave. You don't think of it that way, but that's how it works out. And of course, if you get them to work 100% of the time, and all the product of their labor goes to you, now you are their slave master completely. So it's a question of variables. How much are you a slave, and how much are you forced to serve other people? And unfortunately, there are always a small group of people in society who are willing and anxious to step forward and become the center of this power movement. So where do we go with that? That's who are the victims. The victims are the people who are forced against their will to do things that other people want them to do. So it's always been that way, of course, from the very beginning. But the thing that has changed about that is that starting probably with the development of the printing press, the process began to change the thinking of the masses so that it was no longer acceptable to just say, hey, that's the way it is. You go along with it or you perish. That's the way it used to be. The conquerors always were the ones with the armies, had the superior weapons, and that was it. If you didn't like it, off with your head. But with the beginning of the printing press, the printing of the Bible, and then printing of other works, that the average person, if they could get a little education and learn how to read, began to think independently and began to think that maybe they were just as good as the masters who were telling them what to do. And it was a revolution that was very quickly enacted around the world. And sometimes people call it the Enlightenment, that period, where people began to think in terms of words like democracy, and the people would have rights. What an unusual thought that is, that the average person would have rights. And then the most revolutionary concept of all came along pretty much with the American Revolution, that not only that, but that the people's rights were above the rights of the people who were ruling the government officials. They were considered to be servants of the people rather than the people being servants of the masters. And that all happened in a really short period of time. And so there was a switch in the way in which this psychopathic minority came to power. It used to be they did it just with with weapons and armies, and that was it. End of discussion. And there are places in the world today where that still is pretty much it. Even if it may not be armies, it could be gangs. There are places where criminality reigned completely. It might be the underworld, private armies in a sense. And there are places in the world where people don't even think about liberty or rights. They just don't have them. They don't even think about them. They're not even, in some places, I discovered that in some of the primitive societies, they don't even have a word for freedom. There's not even a word for it. It's not in their thought process. So anyway, back to the question, who is the victim? The victim are the average people who are not in that minority of that power-hungry group that wants to control the rest of society. And so the tactic, as I see it, that became prominent in this revolution was to convince people, convince the masses that becoming a slave or becoming subservient to the ruling class was in their own best interest. It became, in other words, a shift from physical, tangible warfare to psychological warfare. Sun Tzu, the famous Chinese philosopher and military strategist, comes from what, 500 BC or some period like that, wrote a book that's used in all of the military academies today, The Art of War. And one of the most fundamental principles, as I recall, in The Art of War, Sun Tzu said, supreme excellence in warfare is to defeat your enemy without having to engage him in battle. Well, think about that. If you can convince your enemy that resistance is futile, which is the goal of this whole thing, if it's futile, you don't have to fight him. And there were a lot of military strategies built on that. A lot of terrorism is deliberately done to convince the onlooking masses that the resistance is futile and is horrible. So you don't even think about it anymore. But now, that's not the psychological warfare I'm talking about. I'm talking about where they convince you that resistance is not only futile, it's stupid because it's in your own best interest what they are trying to do. So it becomes a psychological or informational war, a propaganda war, where people are told and taught and convinced that they have to ask for their own and submit to their own enslavement because it's for their own best interest. And so that's what we're dealing with. You come back now to the question, who is the victim on this thing? Well, they're all the people that fall for that. And that's just about everybody. And that's the kind of a warfare we're involved in the world today.
So, but is the victim dead? Have they been successful in killing off the victim? That's the question. It's like, because you framed it as a murder mystery, of course, who done it. So the question is, are we still in the torture phase where the smart detective is running around trying to find the victim, or is the victim long dead and we're just trying to catch our tail here?
Well, let me just pause and ponder that for a moment. The victim, of course, is not one person. It's a huge group of people, most of the people on the planet. Well, obviously, not everybody is mentally dead to this strategy. People like you and I, we think we're aware of what's going on. And even though it's in many cases, it's unpopular to talk the way I'm talking, because that arouses the gum-chewing public who don't think about these things. They just take everything they hear on the news as face value. If they think that a war is a good idea because there's some injustice going on someplace, they'll if you don't think a war is a good idea and you've been convinced that it's for the best interest of your country, well, then you're unpatriotic and you become the enemy. You see, if they can convince people that you, by resisting war, that you are unpatriotic and you hate your own country. That's a simple example, but you can change people's attitudes drastically with propaganda. It's become an art and a science. So now, not everybody is dead. Not all the victims are dead or anesthetized is perhaps a better way to say it. I think the great majority of people in the world have been so conditioned to this propaganda day in and day out, and they never hear any counter argument to it, that they have become anesthetized to the truth and anesthetized to the reality of what I've been saying here, because they don't want to hear that. That means that they've been fooled. They might even think that means that we think they're stupid and so forth. No, they're not stupid. They've just been propagandized. I mean, I came out of school not anywhere clear with an understanding like this. I'm embarrassed to even think of some of the things I advocated as a student. I was just repeating what the teachers taught me and all that sort of thing. So nobody's immune to it, but fortunately, sometimes some of us have access to counter information and we get to see the other side of the story. And if we're curious enough, we follow it and say, oh my gosh, I've been fooled. Well, there's nothing wrong with being fooled once or twice. The only problem with it is when you're always fooled by the same trick. Now there's something wrong with you.
So maybe to turn this around, is like, has the perpetrator or the villain been successful then?
Well, so far the perpetrator has been very
Or the creature?
creature is striking the planet and growing even more powerful as we speak. So yeah, greatly successful. And I believe that let's just call them the powers that be for the moment, realize that we're coming to probably a finish line where it will be possibly beyond retrieve if we cross over that line. And because a lot of people are waking up to this reality, as it gets closer and closer to fruition, it's becoming more obvious. And more people are saying, wait a minute, I think I felt for that once before. I mean, they told us that COVID was going to kill us all and turned out to be the flu. And how many people now are sick with or dead because of toxic COVID shots? I fell for that. I got in line. I got my shot. My brother died because of it. My aunt is crippled because of it. Everybody, people I talk to, they know somebody that's dead because of these shots. And now they're telling me that there's going to be a bird flu. Am I going to fall for this again? You know? So the more times they do that trick, or whatever the trick is, people start asking questions because it becomes obvious. So I think our perpetrators decide they've got to go for the finish line pretty fast before too many people wake up. And so it's sort of a race. It's a race for the finish line between the growing number of people who are becoming aware of the dire necessity to do something to change this system, becoming aware that they are being deliberately fooled, that deception is the name of the game. But at the same time, these people who are perpetrating the deception have acquired huge amounts of power over us. And now they're seeking to tie it all up with a big blue bow. And by taking away our money supply, even controlling everything we do, which means everything we do is done, almost everything, through a commercial transaction of some kind. There's an exchange of money somewhere in the process. And if they can have 100% control over the exchange of money or whatever is accepted as money, then they will have 100% over your minute actions every day of your life. This is the goal that they've been working toward for decades, if not, I would say, over a century. I could detect some of that in the old books that are well over a century old. There were people in this financial world that I'm talking about who are beginning to dream and talk about how to bring that about. So they've been at it for a long time, and they're getting close to it. Now, to your question, is it too late? I don't know. I do know that it could be too late, but I believe it also could be just the right time for a reversal, because there's always, there's some law of physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite action or force. I've forgotten whether maybe that's the first law of dynamics or something. I've forgotten what it was, but it's an established principle in physics that everything is in equilibrium, even though temporarily it appears to be out of equilibrium. It's just an adjustment of the equal and opposite forces. And philosophically, you run into the same concept that everything is equal, even though they are in opposites. For example, for every up, there's a down. You cannot have up without down. You cannot have left without right. You cannot have in without out. You cannot even have good without bad. If you took away the bad, then how would you know what was good? It's by comparison to an opposite force. So it's kind of a philosophical question as well as a physics question. Well, it's certainly true in what we're talking about, I think, that this force of world domination that we're talking about has gotten pretty far without arousing this other equal and opposite force, but it has been aroused now. And now we see a rapid coming into power and danger to the opposition of this opposite force, the awareness, the awakening, as some people like to call it. And so I think they're running for the finish line to take away all of the avenues by which the masses that Karl Marx was talking about would be able to retrieve and get back what they've lost. And so our mission, if that's a correct interpretation, I think it is, Our mission is to get off the dime and do everything we can as quickly as possible also, so that they don't trick us into getting over the finish line. And what's the finish line? All right. The
I was
finish
going to ask you
line.
that. It's like I was going to say, like, let's get to that in a minute because I want to
Okay.
talk before we get, like, we got to leave the audience hanging a little bit because I want to talk about the villain a
Okay.
bit more
All right.
and how much
All
of a
right.
chameleon the villain is here over the last 115 years, especially since you've written your book in 1994. Have you seen the villain change coats or colors and form and shape, and how much of a shapeshifter or so is the villain? I'm trying to figure out, like, the role of the Fed, of course, I'm talking about here. Has that changed over the century, the decades and centuries, especially since you've written your book?
Well, I think in principle it has not changed, but I think in efficiency and in ability to move quickly, and the quantitative element of how much control they have has changed. But the principles and the tactics and the strategies, I can't think of anything substantial that's changed, except one thing. And I know we'll be talking about that, and that's the arrival of this digital world in the field of money. Prior to that, it's clear that these people have always wanted a cashless society, but they didn't know how to do it. And then all of a sudden, this digital thing comes into existence and captures the imagination of everyone. And I am personally suspicious that the whole thing was engineered in the beginning precisely by the very people who are now going to or planning to use it to their advantage for this total control mechanism. So if that assumption is correct, their first job would have to be to sell it to the people of the world as something being just the opposite of that. They'd have to sell it as a way of getting out from under the control of these big bad financial planners and controllers and despots, get independent, get of those bad politicians and so forth. When in reality, it was those very people who were putting it together in the first place. Now, I think increasingly the evidence is coming up to prove that absurd analysis is correct, that it was really probably planned all the way from the beginning. So the new thing is this thing called digital currencies, and it is the ultimate cashless mechanism, and it's very similar to what we already have. By the way, this takes us to the world of central bank digital currencies and all of that, bitcoins and so forth, and what they call cryptocurrencies, which is it's a bad name. There's nothing. Crypto means it's hidden or secret. Nothing hidden or secret in currencies. Maybe most of them, the ones that they're talking about, what they call them, the Fed coin and so forth, but the stable coins now has become the latest hoopla. Nothing secret about that. And anyway, and it just look at who's promoting it, who's funding it today. It's all the bankers. Every bank, every central bank in the world is in the forefront of developing these stable coins and these central bank digital currencies. So you're going to tell me that this whole thing was designed to put those people out of business, and they're the ones that are promoting it and putting it in place as quickly as they can? Wake up! I mean, that's not how it could possibly be. So that's the difference, and I think it's the big difference, because if you back up a little bit, you can say right now we have a digital currency. It's already here. Yeah. We already have a central bank digital currency, except for one thing, and that is the programmability of the currency. Or another way to put it is, the digital currency that they're talking about bringing to us now will be their currency, not ours. The present digital currency, like your credit card, let's say, it's theoretically your money because it can be converted into dollars, paper dollars. Now, even though they're not worth anything except maybe to light your cigarette with or something, or roll some tobacco on it, but even so, they still can be used as, they're yours. If somebody doesn't like you, if the government doesn't like you, and they take you out of banking, you say, well, that's okay. I got dollars in my mattress, I've got a big barrel of $20 bills and buried in my backyard or something, or I've got an uncle who can give me some money that I loaned to him. As long as you have physical possession of money, it's not cashless. And even if the cashless society can be converted into physical money that you could say it's mine, I possess it, it's in my pocket, well, that gives you a door, an escape door to still be independent of the system if you want to be. It could be hard, but it could be done. But now with what they're talking about is no, there's nothing you can put in your pocket. And if they turn you off and they don't like what you're saying or doing, and they say you are a domestic terrorist or something like that because you didn't vote correctly.
You're a trucker honking your horns, right?
Yeah. Well, then that's a whole different story, because now they can confiscate your home. They can confiscate your whatever you have in the way of physical property. They could put you in prison. They could even execute you. But let's just say they just want to starve you to death and punish you. They take away your money. Now, what do you have? You can't even go out in the street and sit there on the corner with a tin cup, because there's nothing to put into the tin cup. Nothing. It's really a cashless society now. And
you got to have those little sum up squares machines that you can tap your phone on,
Yeah.
To donate or anything.
Yeah, right. It'll be turned off. I mean, you don't have the password anymore. So that's the thing that's different. And everything else is in flux. They gave us, they talked about central bank digital currencies, and it scared everybody. So now the powers that be are saying, well, we're not going to do central bank digital currencies. Hooray! The masses, hooray, we're not going to do it. Oh, we forgot to notice that what they're going to do, though, will be exactly the same, except under a different name. It'll be
probably
done
call it Trump coin or so, and I'm being funny here, by the way. So
it'll be done through
there's
private
no meaning behind it. But
subdivisions. So I don't know. I'm rambling, of course, but these are the things that come to mind. That let's look at the larger picture, which is we're living in an era of deception, great deception. And we're struggling trying to figure things out on the basis of everybody being honest. That's the problem right there. Anytime you start questioning the veracity or the motives of these people, you're called a conspiracy theorist. And you're supposed to be silenced so that nobody even thinks about the possibility that somebody might be lying to you. It's not allowed to be part of the discussion. And this is psychological warfare.
How do you break out of that? Let's maybe talk hashtag end the Fed or end the Fed as well. Like, how do we stop this as well? Like, how do we rise up? Gold is probably an option, and I don't want to put words in your mouth here. So I'm curious, like, what's the way out of the system? Right? I've been hearing end the Fed quite a bit. I struggle with, like, what does the day one end the Fed plus one look like for us?
Well, okay, I think that's a good anchor point, because end the Fed today means something different than what it did 20 years ago. A lot different. By that, I mean that today, the powers that be want to end the Fed. It's now on their agenda to end the Fed. They're ready for something better for them. The Fed, the old Fed, the way it was when it was created, was bad enough because it was a cartel, but it was still based on money that was not owned by the banks or by the governments. It was still the people's money. But now the money is all going to be owned by the banking system and the financial institutions. They will own everything, and you will be allowed to participate in that economic milieu if you're good boys and girls and do exactly as you're told. So to end the Fed 20 years ago would mean to go back to traditional banking, or hopefully not traditional, but untraditional. By that, I mean, we should go back to honest banking. And that rarely ever happened in history, except in a few rare cases. But banking has always been fraudulent because, the old saying is, well, why do crooks rob banks? And the answer is that's because that's where the money is. And I say that because why is banking always been fraudulent is because it's so easy. It's easy. Nobody understands that they're being cheated when they're being cheated by a bank, especially if the bank is approved by the government and supposedly regulated by the government. I think of I think of a letter that was sent to Thomas Jefferson shortly after the Constitution was drafted and signed into law. Jefferson had a letter that he received from a friend, a doctor friend. And we know about this because it's in the Jeffersonian Museum. And the doctor said, well, Mr. Jefferson, now that we have this new Constitution and this new republic, this new government, and I think he used the word republic correctly too, how can we be certain that only good men are in office? And Jefferson's response, magnificent, a little bit irate, he said something like this. He said, let us not speak to us, let us not discuss good men in office. Rather, let us bind men down with the chains of the Constitution. And there you have it. There you have the whole solution right there. In modern vernacular, Jefferson was saying, good men in office? You got to be kidding me. No, you're not going to find good men in office because governments and other institutions which are loaded with money and power, any institution with great wealth and influence over human activity is a magnet to the predator class. And all the crooks in the world, all the suede shoe artists, all the outright crooks, the murderers, the cheaters, the stealers, the warmongers are drawn to governments like a moth is drawn to fire. And if you think that you're going to have a government of good men in office, you're crazy. You're stupid. You don't understand human nature and you don't understand history. Let us bind men down by the chains of the Constitution. Let us assume that everybody in government is a crook. And we'll get along fine after that. And that is a mess. That it's not bad to be suspicious of evil people in places of great authority like that. It's natural. It'll always happen. So let's quit. Everybody in office is a scoundrel and we'll get along fine. So okay. Having said that, why did I go into that? Is because when we come to solutions, whatever it is, it cannot be based on faith in the goodwill and the good and the honesty and integrity of the men and women in political positions. If we do, we lose. Having said that, then where do we start? All right. We start with helping our fellow travelers on this spaceship called Earth, helping our fellow travelers to understand the truth of what I just said, and to understand it's nothing to be ashamed of to say it, to understand that this is the right thing to do, and we'll all be better off if we understand that. And then the next thing is that how do we revamp the system legally, using the system? The Constitution is still battered though it is, it's still there if people will honor it. Who are the people? The justices, of course, the Supreme Court justices, and the local justices as well. It's still there. It's still ready to be used for those who understand what it means. So our educational role has to be followed by a practical role of getting the right people into office in political positions and getting the wrong people out. The idea of sending a letter to your congressman and letting him know what you think is over. The congressman doesn't care what you think. The congressman cares who's sending the checks to him. Most congressmen and senators. And that's a reality. And until you face that reality and change your solutions to conform with that reality, you cannot win. So back to the question, how do we change this? Well, first of all, we build a better understanding, a grassroots understanding among the people, the masses. And then there's political support for candidates who will be chosen for political office, not because they want to be, but because they don't want to be in political office. When you see somebody says, I want to run for office, oh, wait a minute, why does he want to run for office? Most people I know that think the way I'm discussing it, they don't want to be burdened when in public office. They got their lives to live. They don't want to dominate and control other people. those guys that go to school and learn about politics and then they want to become president or emperor or something, those are the people you have to look out for. We have to find and motivate candidates who do not want to go into political office to do it, because those are the only ones you can really count on not making a career out of it. And you go on and on and on. But you start with the idea of facing reality, that we are ourselves still capable of changing the system if we go about it correctly and we go about it quickly.
And maybe one last question here. Is Elon Musk that person you sort of described just now? And does he fulfill that role? Just trying to put some context around it and understand it. Is Elon Musk that person? Doesn't really want to be in office, but he's doing it anyway. He's not officially in office, don't get me wrong. But he's almost a politician now these days as well. He's more the axe that's being swung, I guess. I'm not sure if he's the axe that's being swung at the Fabian glass window here at the Globe there, to use that analogy again. But is he that person that you just described? Somebody didn't really want to be in office, but he saw that there was a need for change and offered his services?
Well, I don't personally see it that way. No, I don't want to.
No, I'm curious. Like, that's why I'm asking. Like, I'm asking for your opinion, of course. And that, you can contradict me. I'm just trying to make an assumption.
It's not a contradiction, but first of all, anybody that is in politics, and Elon Musk is in politics. Now, maybe not political party politics, but it's definitely politics. And how do I answer this thing? I don't want to get people mad at me, but I'm a skeptic. Right? I'm 93 years old, and I've been betrayed so many times. But I don't want to make the same mistake for the 50th time. You know, so I look at everybody in political prominence. I look at them with the jaundiced eyes. Okay, am I being lied to again, or what's the deal here? I think of Jefferson's advice. You know, I'm not looking for a good man in office. I'm assuming everybody that we give political power to, I'm assuming that they're either are corrupted or corruptible. Almost everybody is corruptible. I mean, there's a way to get to almost everybody. You know, well, Mr. Smith, you know, you have a very nice wife and children. We'd hate to see something happen to them. It'd be tragic if something happened to them. And, you know, there are a lot of bad people out there, and we think you need protection and so forth. You know, it's the old mafia story, protection game. There are very few people that can't be bought or bribed or threatened or intimidated in some way. And if you build a political system on that strong man that can always be counted upon, you've made a mistake. And we're back to the Jeffersonian idea of just don't waste your time doing that. Assume that these people are going to be corruptible in time. If they're not, they'll be replaced eventually by somebody who will be. So if we keep that frame of mind, then it doesn't matter what I think about Elon Musk or anybody else. I'm suspicious. I want to make sure that we're not following in the footsteps of Mussolini, for example. I had a chance to study the writings of Benito Mussolini when I was a young guy. I was trying to compare the Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital by Karl Marx. I was comparing that with Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf and the writings of Benito Mussolini. And I wanted to find out what was going on with these opposites. You know, communists were supposed to be the opposites of the Nazis, the fascists. They fought a war. They killed millions of people, probably. And so they had to be opposites. Well, I wanted to see how opposite they were. And I found out that they weren't opposites at all. They believed exactly the same things. And what they were fighting over was not belief systems or principles. They were fighting over territory. They were fighting over who was going to be the dominant person in the new world order that they wanted to build. And although they fought each other, they would unite against anybody that would challenge either of their positions, because they're the same position. And by the way, there's a name for communism and fascism. A better name for both of them is called collectivism. It's the same philosophy. I didn't know any of this at the time, but the word collectivism, go look it up. It represents communism, fascism, Nazism, socialism, New Dealism, all of these concepts where people believe that the group is more important than the individual. And that's the world that we live in. every government today in the world is based on the principle of collectivism, including our own. So we argue over the left and right. It makes no difference. Republicans, Democrats, leftists, rightists, conservatives, liberals, all of these words, they don't mean anything, but you start talking about collectivists and individualists, now you've got something. So that's part of our educational mission, is stop using those mushy words and use words that can be defined in the dictionary, and then choose sides. Now you're ready to choose sides. But if you have to choose between being a fascist or a Nazi, what's the choice? You lose either way. You come out to lose. If you have to choose between Republican and Democrat, look at the historical record, my friends. Over the years, there's been zero substantial change. A lot of debates, a lot of talk, a lot of fire and brimstone, and sometimes little things happen, then they unhappen. One regime will make a change, and then the next one will undo it, back and forth. Kind of reminds me of back in the day when television was first being available to the middle class. My grandmother became a fan of wrestling. I think it was on Saturdays they had wrestling matches. And occasionally I'd be there at my grandmother's place, and she'd be in front of that TV set, and she'd get so ramped up over these wrestling matches. And looking back on it, it was kind of funny. One of the wrestlers would always be dressed with an American flag or something like that. His hair was combed, usually a blonde guy. Had a nice smile. He was nicely shaved and he was clean. Then there was a guy with a swastika on his arm or something like that. Really burly guy, dirty and mean looking, scars on him, and they're growling and snarling. And he was a dirty fighter. And I can remember my grandmother saying, she was always rooting for the American flag. Of course. Look out behind you, and boom! And these guys would throw each other occasionally right out of the ring, onto the floor. They hit the chairs. Think, wow, those guys are hurting each other. What I didn't realize is what I learned later is that both of those guys work for the same company. They're both hired by the same company, and they both had the same trainers, and they were told who was going to win the match. But they were also told to make a good fight. Make it a good fight, because otherwise the people won't come. All right, there's your model for politics. Need I say more?
No. Plenty said, Ed. And talking about educational mission, I know you have a conference coming up in July. Can you tell us a bit more about that? What's the plan there?
Well, yes, we have something called the Red Pill Expo, which is a project of the Red Pill University, which we created. And of course, the red pill meme is the idea of take the red pill, man, and wake up to reality, break all your illusions about life, see the world the way it really works. That's kind of our popularized version of what I'm talking about, is to see the world the way it really works. And so we decided to try and see if the red pill meme would appeal to anybody. We can't do this ourselves. I mean, some of us, I presume you are one of us, that spend most of your life thinking about these matters and doing things. But the average good old Joe doesn't have time for that. He's got to, raise a family and protect the family and put bread on the table, and a lot of things going on. And so we can't do this alone. We need that group around us of a larger number. We call it Project Outreach, and we call it now Red Pill. And so the Red Pill Expo is part of that movement to reach out to larger numbers of people. And we put it on, first of all, annually. Now we're putting it on twice a year. And the next one is in July 12 and 13 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I hope that all of your listeners will make a note of it and go on to the website. Our website for that is redpillexpo.org, and see what's going to happen there in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It'll be a combination of real live event, and that's really where the action is, but also for the millions of people that can't make it to Tulsa, it's also going to be a live stream, and the live stream is absolutely free. We decided we'll bite the bullet and hope we get support enough that we can afford to give away this thing. And we did that the last time for the first time, by the way. We always had to sell tickets, for for the live stream, because who's going to pay for this thing? This is
It's not cheap.
expensive to do. You got to have the camera crews and everything. You got to ship them from Los Angeles to wherever you're going, and then the editing and the lights, and oh man, the hotels rip you to pieces with expenses for this, that, and the other thing. So who's going to pay for this, Ed? Well, I don't know. Maybe somebody will. So we felt we had to charge like $35, $45 for a live stream. Well, last time we did it, which was back in November, we said, nope, we're going to make this free, and anybody in the world could look at it, and God help us. And it worked. It worked. I think we just about broke even. We established that the model works, and I'm happy to report that instead of having maybe 7,000 or 8,000 people on our online, watching it as we used to have, at the highest point during those 2 days back in November, we had over 300,000 people watching the Red Pill Expo.
Wow!
So we made a proof of concept. And now we're going to do it again, this time hopefully better. And we're going to cover the world with the message. And so if you go and take a look at Red Pill Expo, you'll see who our speakers are going to be and what our projects are.
We'll put a link down below.
Thank you. We want to put campuses of Red Pill University in every county, because boots on the ground is where the action is. You can't win a war, and this is a war, psychological war, but even that you can't win by exchange. You've got to be active in local politics. You've got to be influential. You've got to determine who's going to be on your city council, who's your mayor, who's going to be elected as your sheriff. What about the Board of Education? We've got to build a movement at the local level up, not from the top down, but from the bottom up. Well, and that's in a short version, that's what it's all about.
Fantastic. Ed, what a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on Soar Financially.
Well, thank you for your kindness and letting me rattle on and wander around.
I enjoyed it. I hope our audience did as well, but I did. So,
I hope so.
No, fantastic. Ed, thank you so much for your time.
If they don't like it, it's not your fault.
Just put that in the comments down below. Crucify us. I'll take it. It helps. So, Ed, thank you so much for your time, and everybody else.
I have one more thing, if I may promo it, and I should have it in my hand, but I don't. Anyway, I prepared a booklet, a free booklet, that I hope people will want to read on this issue of collectivism versus individualism. It's the heartbeat of our movement. We have to stop in the election arena saying, well, who are the good guys and who are the bad guys? Because they can lie about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do we go on? We have to be on principles. Well, what are the principles of collectivism versus individualism? Now, they can't lie about that because they have a record of performance.
Yeah.
So if you want to know more about how I view this core argument of what we should be thinking and talking about when it comes to elections, it should not be who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. We are the good guys and they're the bad guys. It should be, well, what did they believe? What principles do they endorse by the voting that they do and the projects which they advance and so forth? And that is collectivism versus individualism. So if you want to know more about that, go to the internet and type in the word chasm. That's the name of the document. The chasm, CHASM, .realityzone.com. chasm.realityzone.com, and they'll take you to our website, and you just give us your email and we'll send you a downloadable copy of the booklet.
Fantastic. No, we'll put that link down below as well, of course. I've taken note of that. So,
all right. Well, thank you, my friend, for inviting me and listening to me, and good luck to you.
It was a great pleasure, Ed. Thank you so much, and everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Ed Griffin, and if you did, please leave a comment down below, leave a like, of course, and if you haven't done so, subscribe to our channel. It's a free way to support us, and we tremendously appreciate it. Really curious to read your thoughts. I read every single comment. Not always healthy, but I do, so put them down below. We do want to hear from you. How are you approaching this topic? Where do you stand? How should we improve our conversation? Always open for constructive criticism here as well, so please let us know. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back with lots more. Thank you.